Tonight on NationToNation, the investigation into Annie Pootoogook's death.
We take each case based on its own merits and circumstances.
The acclaimed Inuit artist is laid to rest in Cape Dorset. And remembering Annie in Ottawa. This is Nation to Nation. I'm Jorge Barrera. News of Annie Pootoogook's death hit the Inuit community in Ottawa hard. But their grieving quickly turned to anger after an Ottawa police officer was caught posting racist and degrading comments about Annie on social media in response to an online story about her death. The officer, Sergeant Harnshire, wrote, "She got drunk and drowned. Who knows? Typically, many Aboriginals have very short lifespans, talent or not." In another comment, he said, "Much of the Aboriginal population in Canada is just satisfied being alcohol or drug abusers." The comments ignited a firestorm, and Ottawa's Police Chief Charles Bordeleau was forced to deal with the fallout. Joining me now is Ottawa Police Chief Charles Bordeleau. Chief Bordeleau, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Let's get right into this. About 2 weeks ago, one of your officers was caught posting inflammatory, derogatory comments in response to an online story about Annie Pootoogook's death. And I know you received public complaints about it, accusations of racism, and I know you launched an investigation into that. I'm just wondering, what is the status of that?
Well, first and foremost, our condolences go to Annie's family. Annie was well known to some of our police officers who worked the downtown area, and we feel her death as well, and we're working very diligently to try to understand exactly what took place, what led up to her death. And hopefully that investigation will shed some light on as to exactly what took place. And you're quite right. I received an email Sunday night about some comments that allegedly one of my officers had posted on a Ottawa Citizen website. I looked at those comments and was very disturbed by them. I found them offensive and totally inappropriate. The next day, I asked my executive officer to make sure that they were removed. That was done, and then I launched a chief's complaint under the Police Services Act to conduct investigations. The comments are racist. They don't reflect the values of the Ottawa Police Service. And the other thing that they have done is they've undone some of the tremendous work that our officers are doing each and every day to build some strong relationships with our Indigenous communities, and that wasn't helpful. And understand the hurt that it has caused our community, and I apologize on behalf of the Ottawa Police Service that those comments are ever posted.
And is that officer still on the job? What's the status of the investigation into?
So the investigation is progressing very well. I had asked for it to be expedited, so I'm awaiting a recommendation and conclusion of that investigation shortly, and then we'll take the next steps with respect to investigative. He's conducting right now administrative work within the section that he's currently assigned to.
Okay. Now, around the same time this happened in Thunder Bay, a police officer there was also caught, posting racist comments about Indigenous people there. And the police chief in Thunder Bay actually referred the case to the Office of the Independent Police Review Director, and then he suspended the officer and 4 of his colleagues, put them on administrative leave, pending, I guess, conclusion of that investigation by that office. I'm just wondering, why didn't you go that route, or is that still on the table?
So I've had discussions actually with Chief Levesque. He was in Ottawa just a couple of weeks ago, and we had discussions. The cases are different, and we take when we make a decision whether or not to suspend an officer, we take each case based on its own merits and circumstances. So I made the decision that the officer could remain on duty administratively, not performing all his functions, and expedited the investigation. I did not. It wasn't a complaint that I received. It was an email from the public informing me of the email, the postings that have been done. I believe Chief Levesque was an actual complaint, which he then asked the OIPRD to do the investigation. It's a fairly straightforward investigation, and I want to ensure that the public knows that we're dealing with it seriously. We're being transparent about it, and I think we'll be reporting back as far as what the outcome of that investigation is.
And speaking of the public, how do you think all this racism stuff that came out with this officer, how do you think it's impacting their perception of how you guys are handling the investigation into the death of Annie Pootoogook?
Well, the death of Annie is a priority for us, and that's why a major crime unit is conducting the investigation. They've spent hundreds of hours reviewing surveillance tapes. They've done numerous interviews with individuals where we're trying to trace back exactly where Annie was before her death. And so they're having some success with that, and they're gathering all the information. So we're investing a lot of time and effort to determine exactly what took place with Annie. And it's an investigation we're taking seriously, and we have a number of officers actively working on it today.
Now, Annie Pootoogook's case contains many of the elements that made the issue of murdered and missing Indigenous women a national tragedy, which led to this inquiry that's currently underway. I'm just wondering, how do you feel about how your department dealt with this death, this case, after she was found September 19th in the river, in its initial stages?
I think we dealt with it very appropriately. Our officers responded to the scene. Our initial response to a death is by our district investigators. They identified, in consultation with other officers within the police service, they identified some issues that required further involvement. So that's why we brought in Major Crime, who are the experts in these types of circumstances, to really dig into exactly to find out what took place, working very closely with the coroner's office as well. I'm very satisfied with the thoroughness of the investigation that is taking place currently, and to exactly ascertain what took place with what happened with Annie and what led to her death.
But after her body was found, your department put out a statement saying that they didn't consider the death was suspicious. I'm just wondering, who made that determination? Why was it done so quickly?
So I won't get into the specifics because it's still an ongoing case, but I can tell you some information that's presented to our first responders would lead to certain conclusions. But then we have a further review of that by other specialist investigations and with other information from medical practitioners, then provide us some new information that said, okay, there's things here that we need to further look into. So I think it demonstrates that when we get new information, that we're always assessing it with, like any other death, to make sure that we dig into identifying exactly what causes a person's death.
But that initial declaration, do you think that was a misstep? Because it sort of muddied the waters. I mean, it muddied them initially. There was some outcry from the Inuit community, and then you had the stuff with the online comments. Was that a misstep to go so quickly and say publicly, you know what, there's nothing suspicious about this? I mean, was that a mistake done by the district investigators?
We always get new information, Jorge, as far as investigations are taking place. When we get that new information, and it was very early into the process, when we get new information, then we act upon it, and that's what we did. New information was received during the investigation at the very early stages. We called in our major crime people to consult, and then we took further steps to identify exactly what had taken place.
And there was a pathologist examination of the body, I think last week, that concluded, because the body's now in Cape Dorset. The funeral was on Wednesday, and there's a memorial service. There was a memorial service today at 11. I'm just wondering, what is the status of that investigation right now? Where are you guys at? What can you tell us? I know you talked about surveillance video, but what? So
we're interviewing people and who may have had contact with Annie before her death. So that is ongoing, and it is still an active investigation. And so I'm waiting for reports from our major crime investigators as to determine exactly what took place.
And what are you doing to mend the relationship with the Inuit community that, as you said, was damaged by all these events?
Yeah, we recognize that trust and confidence in the police service is critical for all our communities, and our Indigenous communities, diverse communities, and we work very hard at each day to build that relationship. And it's been fractured by those comments that were made online. So we've reached out to a number of organizations. I've spoken personally to an individual that is in charge of our Aboriginal network and had those conversations with him. And my outreach team have also reached out to Inuit IT communities as well to have that conversation, have that dialogue as to what took place and how we can continue to move forward. We have a number of Indigenous community members on our compact group that have also spoken publicly. We've had some discussions with them as well, recognizing that there's been some hurt, and we need to help repair that and bring us back to where we should be from relationship perspective.
Well, thank you so much for stopping by, Chief Bordeleau. I appreciate your time, and hopefully you'll come back and visit us again sometime.
Thank you very much. Look forward to that.
Thank you.
After the break, we're back with APTN's Kent Driscoll. He attended Annie Pootoogook's funeral in Cape Dorset on Wednesday, so stay with us. This is Nation to Nation. I'm Jorge Barrera. Before the break, we spoke with Ottawa Police Chief Charles Bordeleau about the investigation into Annie Pootoogook's death. The investigation is still ongoing. Annie was laid to rest in her home community of Cape Dorset, Nunavut on Wednesday. Kent Driscoll was there and joins me now. Kent, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Jorge.
Kent, I was wondering if you could paint a picture for us about the funeral. What did you see and hear?
Well, it was a small community funeral held inside the community hall in Cape Dorset. There were too many people expected to actually hold it in the church. And it worked out there were more than 100, 120, 130 people at the service. And a Nunavut funeral service in a small community is a very specific thing. She was there in a pine box and not a fancy coffin. The pine box was resting on a folding table just in the community hall. And the entire first 2 rows of people were filled with family members of hers. And there was raw grief evident throughout the entire ceremony. Occasionally someone would start crying and the sobs would build until it was almost like this continuous wailing throughout it. And then it would subside. And Annie's daughter, the adoptive parents of the daughter, they made it to Cape Dorset for the funeral. And the only part of the entire service that was in English was when they acknowledged them and thanked them for coming to bring young Napachi to meet the rest of the family. It was a very moving service, Jorge.
It sounds like it was very moving, Kent. I'm just wondering, you got the chance to speak with some of Annie's relatives in Cape Dorset. Can you tell me a little bit about what they were saying? How did they remember Annie?
Well, I ran into C. Pootoogook, who is her brother, while I was visiting it's called the West Baffin Eskimo Co-op. It's where all the famous prints come from. And he works there too. And he was talking about Annie, and the thing that he said that stuck with me throughout the entire trip there, she only told true stories. Good or bad, everything she said was true. And that's so evident in her art. Her art is completely regular images that you would see in an Arctic community. And talking to Jimmy Manning, former manager of the art co-op there, he says it changed Inuit art forever. The idea of bringing in actual images instead of the symbolic pictures of wildlife that were coming out. Now, through Annie Pootoogook and the people who are following her, we're seeing actual Arctic images in actual Arctic art.
Thank you so much, Kent, for sharing your sort of eyewitness description of what you saw and heard in Cape Dorset during yesterday's moving funeral for Annie. And here in Ottawa, a memorial service was held for Annie today. 2 of her relatives joined me after the break to talk about Annie's last few days and about their views on how the police handled the investigation. Nation to Nation, we'll be right back. This is Nation to Nation. I'm Jorge Barrera. Today, over 100 people gathered in St. Paul's Church in downtown Ottawa to remember Annie Pootoogook. Friends and family were there to honor her life. 2 of Annie's relatives that attended the memorial are here with me in studio. Joining me now is Saituki Joami and Mary Akavak. Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Saituki, for being here today. I mean, the day of Annie Pootoogook's memorial, which was held in Ottawa at St. Paul's earlier today. Mary, you spoke at the memorial, and you're a relative of Annie's, and you knew her. Tell me a little bit about the last time that you saw Annie.
I've been seeing her on and off, like so many years, like not every day, but I saw her like approximately 2 days before she died with my sister. And I took Annie to my sister's place because my sister had a stroke before, like not too long ago, so she's in a wheelchair. So I took Annie over there and we spent 3 of us together, all 3 of us all day. And we had a good time, you know, but she said a lot of things in between.
And what was she talking about? How was she doing that day?
I asked her, like, I don't want to ask you, Annie, but I know why you are here like so many times before. Were you assaulted again? She said, yeah. That's why I came to Sheps.
Shepherds of Good Hope, the shelter.
Yes, thanks to them, they've been helping her a lot. So I picked her up from there. I went there at first because I know people over there. I've been there before. And I took her to hospice where my sister lives. And I showed her, you know, if you've got nowhere to go visit my sister, pick her up, whatever, be with her. She said, yeah, we went there, so we ended up spending time together, all 3 of us.
Do you remember the last thing she told you before she left, and do you know where she was going that evening?
After she told me that she's been abused and beaten up so many times by the same guy that I know about, and 2 other people, 2 other women before Annie, he did the same thing, but they survived. But he kept threatening Annie that he's going to do this and do that. And I kept telling Annie, no, don't go to him alone. Go with a social service worker or police officer. If you need your stuff, the art stuff, anything you need, your clothing, you cannot go there alone. I want to, but I'm afraid. So she said, yeah, I'll try. That was 2 days after. 2 days after I heard, have you heard about Annie? I said, Annie who? Annie Pootoogook. I was just with her 2 days ago. And
yeah,
that's when I heard.
Saituki, you've been speaking out a lot about this case, the handling of the case, Annie's case by the Ottawa police. We had that issue of the racist statements posted by that Ottawa police officer. I know that you've had meetings with one of their police liaisons. I'm just wondering, how is that going? How do you feel that the Ottawa police is reacting to this now that they've seen the community reaction to what's been going on?
The onus has always been on the Ottawa police, particularly the chief of police, to rectify this situation in relation to the racist remarks that was said by one police officer and the inaction that was by the police chief. The onus is on the police chief to apologize for his inaction and also get the appropriate actions taken in regards to the police officer that made the racist remarks. And we await for that, because that's the only appropriate thing they should do if they want to have a good relationship or get relationships back with the Inuit community and other communities of the city.
Mary, when you spoke today during the memorial, you also spoke about sort of a bigger issue about what Indigenous people face and how you hope that all of this would help people's eyes open. What are you hoping that people see?
I hope that more help is being done for Aboriginal people, Native people, as people say. Like there are so many women or so many young men that have gone lost, unfound, or murdered, and it's not fair. Like, what's going on? Like, who's doing this? And there's not much thing going on for investigation, especially in my point of view. Like, if, let's say I'm not a racist, okay? But if I was a white person who got found in the river, all the media from all over the world would go and sue or whatever, get investigation more going. But if this happens to Aboriginal Native people, it's like, oh, one little story and that's it. It's not kind of fair, you know. Like, we are people, we are the First Nations, and it's like we need some things done a lot more than just look at a little bit and then forget about it. No, we don't forget about it. No.
And just to finish this up, you talked a little bit about what Annie was like, how excited she would get about eating country food and things like that. Tell me a happy memory about Annie.
Yeah, ever since I met her years ago, like every time we met, it was more like us being more close friendship between me and her instead of her being well known. I know she's got good talent and good artist, but we both saw each other as personal friendship together. Mm-hmm. And every time I saw her, she'd kind of do a little dance. I want to eat with you again. If you have native food, or if not native food, at least make me something. I said, yeah, of course, I'll find something. If you got nothing, Mary, well, she used to call me Miali, because that's my original name, Miali. Mm-hmm. And then she'd say, oh, at least just tea and bannock. Mm-hmm. That was good for her as long as we're together.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Saituki, for joining us. And I hope you guys will come back and chat with us again. Saituki, I know we've talked a lot about this issue, and I'm sure there's going to be other opportunities for us to talk about it further. So thank you so much for coming on this bittersweet day, remembering Annie, remembering the happy things, but also remembering that she's gone. Thank you for coming.
Could I say one more thing at least?
Okay.
I'd like to say my condolences to all her family in Kingai, Cape Dorset, and all over the world who know her. Thank you for being kind to her and being nice to her, because she always used to say thank you about them to me, even though I didn't know them, most of them. So, thank you.
Well, that's all the time we have for Nation to Nation tonight. Next week, MPs are back in the House. We'll have a panel of politicians in studio and political news affecting you. We leave you now with Annie Pootoogook's memorial, which was held in Ottawa earlier today.